Okay, a quick episode on the unnatural association of consciousness. And if the viewers look at the subtitle, to be honest, I wanted to name this episode what's written in the subtitle, but it was too long. So this lecture is on billions of hidden accessible parallel realities awaiting collective emergence. You know, I have noticed something interesting, that as the human being entertains the human archetype, inevitably it reaches a point, like eventually it's going to reach a point where it's going to get bored. We're going to get bored of being what we have always been. Beyond the pride of a lifetime, beyond the desires of a temporary ego, human beings have to consider all angles to the potential of reality. It's as if we're in a world, and before we exit this world, its secrets must be unraveled. Before starting this episode, actually starting since yesterday, I had this notion arose to me, that what if consciousness is unnatural? And I thought about this to such a degree where I was like, what does it mean that intelligence is unnatural? Usually the perspective we have is that everything in nature is natural. Some people can, let's say some deep nature lovers can even say that human beings building robots that destroy, like let's say building machines that destroy nature, it's still natural. It's as if natural beings led to the unnatural. But I thought about, okay, if we look at planet Earth and what's going on this planet, what could be a clue that something is off, that something is not fitting into the puzzle of reality, puzzle of the natural world? And believe it or not, the idea, at least I had, was that consciousness could be seen as unnatural. Now, if you are someone who's a yogi, a mystic, someone who finds the truth of the world to be hidden in nature, you may disagree. You may be like, Mr.Within, what do you mean consciousness is unnatural? Like it's starting from the brain and whatnot, how could it be unnatural? But the thing is, the way I'm seeing conscious living being unnatural is because what it seeks is beyond nature. It's as if we are this natural entity that deep down feels it is enlightened beyond, it's entitled beyond nature. What has happened? When you look at the planet, before the ability of human beings to use language, before the ability of human beings to create technologies, and when I say technologies, I mean the ones that have a sort of environmental impact, it's as if the planet was doing its own thing. And then when human beings noticed that they're separate from the planet, another sort of agenda in nature began. I have thought about it that, imagine there was extraterrestrial consciousness. Or I shouldn't say extraterrestrial consciousness, let's say there were extraterrestrial beings. And these extraterrestrial beings what was that show called? Star Trek, where there was this thing called the Prime Directive, something like that, where, more advanced extraterrestrial species could not contact, let's say, a terrestrial species. That is at an early phase. And I thought about if extraterrestrial consciousness could not land on Earth, could not physically enter Earth, what other way would it have to enter Earth? And then I noticed we are animals that can write and speak. To me, what the mind is doing is actually the most alien thing ever. If somebody was like, what's the closest thing to alien technology on this planet of ours, I'd be like, it's the human mind. The human mind, what it is doing, it is actually recreating the world and then readjusting it and then living through the readjustment in the actual world. The argument for consciousness being unnatural is that consciousness isn't, or the intelligence of the human being is not interested in just nature. This is clear. We are interested in new dimensions more than new dimensions being natural, unnatural, or natural or unnatural. The title of this episode can be even considered that if nature does something unnatural, is it natural? The mind was not content enough with the outer realms. Every inventor, every artist, every act of multidimensional novel creation, it's as if there is a force in the human being that does not want to just survive in the fittest way. It wants to survive beyond the worlds that it is acknowledged. Sure, on one level, evolution was like a creature didn't want to die, but on another level, it's as if a creature didn't want to stay in the same world. There is an unnatural component to consciousness because in this modern age of ours, the conscious activities of human beings are not prioritizing nature. There is this thing that they say that if an egg breaks from the outside, there is no life. If an egg breaks from the inside, there is life. If we were to consider that the mind hatches, if we were to consider that 8 billion beings are in one physical realm, but each of them harbors a hidden inner realm. And if we were to ask, what is the purpose of life? Is it a body to realize that it's a mind Is it a mind to realize it is a body? Is it the mind and the body, or the body and the mind being in some sort of synchronized balance for us to witness something more? When I wonder about really the purpose of life, to me, there's a huge revelation component to it. That means it's as if the relationship that life has with itself is, in some sense, when it comes to the mind, there's something called memory, and what is memory is actually our past. You know, what is really bizarre is to realize that intelligence is just present, and the associations we have to a past and future, those are projections. You know, it's as if the starting point for trying to solve the existential and experiential problem for human beings is, in some sense, to shape the problem and realize existentially we're all wondering how energy is going to change, and our free will gives us an ability to coordinate that shift in energy. That means the purpose of visible, observable life is existential expression. This cannot be avoided. As long as the creature can move, observe, and respond and react, it is as if like the purpose of existence is to play your existential part. Pretty much the conscious navigation of energy. That's within the atomic realm. When I think about what is the purpose beyond of an existential level, a physical level, I wonder about what is the experiential purpose of life. And the thing about experience is that the mind can receive, create, and destroy. Just pretty much the mind is like world hopping. Really, what we call a human being with a mind is actually a space, a sort of spiritually endless space of awareness, where the body is found inside, and we start off from a first perspective position. It's as if nature is designed so that our eyes are not above our head looking at us from like a third person perspective. It's actually designed that it's first person, as if nature didn't want itself to know that what it is. That means to me the fact that the human eyes, they say it's the windows to the soul. Guess what? The soul is looking out through these windows, and what the soul is the unknown variable to intelligence. You know, I have wondered so many times about how do you look at this life? What is its purpose? What is the purpose of the mind? Why do we have this advanced technology as our intelligence that can in some sense compare worlds of experience with one another? When I think about, let's say, the destination of my existence, it's something that needs to be let go of as much as the person entertains, you know, the physical meaning of life. You know, it's as if you could be a great athlete, but at some point you have to step out of this vehicle you have driven so well. Now, when that time comes, the question comes that is the human intelligence multidimensional, or is it in a single dimension, right? Because the moment somebody says natural, unnatural, that's a splitting of dimensions, you know. I've thought about how would I say this, like the relationship of existence and experience, a sort of double-edged, not sword, but double-edged world. You know, it's as if there's this unknown reality, and one side of the coin, it's like you get to see its shape. The other side of the coin, you get to see what is looking through the shape, looking at the shape. For now, let's say how far human beings have come, and I'm just one person in 2022 talking about this, who knows how much the future will reveal of itself. To me, self in a world in a self. We're not just being selves in a world. The mind is actually taking the role of worldhood. If a person closes, let's say a person looks in the mirror and they're like, yeah, I saw my body, that's me right there, you know, and then that same person closes their eyes, and then the attention can visualize any subjective identity. You know, a person opens their eyes, human consciousness, they close their eyes, whatever archetype that's projected, you know, the consciousness of that applies. If we look at human civilization, it is ignoring nature. And on some level it has to. Do you know? That means if consciousness, if self-awareness can be defined as a body, like a part of the earth separating itself from the earth, you know, this explains how, you know, human intelligence or just creaturehood is an unnatural diversion of nature. It's as if when we were the planet was our whole intelligence. But when we became a part of the planet, separate to the planet moving, it was as if, how can I tell you, the world divided the moment we did. What really is unnatural, this could be a new definition of what unnatural is separation. As far as human beings are concerned, nature is a singular event. You know, we don't say that there were, you know, they don't teach in science class that there's multiple universes, and each universe, the laws of nature can be different. They teach that it's one universe, it's one event, and inside this one event, we are finding many variations of, you know, energy. The behavior of intelligence on the planet can be unnatural, and yet the intelligence can be natural. That means what is unnatural is the separate behavior of something that is in a collective system. In the subtitle, when I've written billions of hidden, accessible, parallel realities awaiting collective emergence, it's pretty much another way of saying that for how long is the species going to play this hide and seek game with its world? I've thought about even the concept of honor. You know, what is the most honorable thing? And usually the most honorable people are, at least in the way I have understood it, is that the greatest honor is an awareness to the presence of how everything is at the moment. That means like a truly honorable being surpasses an honorable self, in the sense that it's not like they're just honoring how they are existing as a self. They are also honoring how other variables, intelligent variables in the realm are existing to themselves, and then they're wondering about the intelligence of the world existing to itself. The honor extends beyond individual framework into a collective context. There was a person in history who some part of me has had a very deep relationship to. And I'm personally someone who, if somebody tells me, Mr. Within, do you have past lives? I'll be like, this lifetime I'm living, whatever you see as me is such a tiny percentage of what I am that really, it's like the tip of the iceberg. Having a past life is another tip of the iceberg. To me, it's on some level meaningless. But if there was a person who I would say a sort of unbreakable, unified attention could gaze through the eyes of, I would say that Rishi Vyasa on this planet has been one of the beings that have fascinated me the most. To me, he is, I wouldn't say he is the divine, but I would say it this way, that I would say like what has been attributed to Rishi Vyasa, that they say he was the incarnation of God in language. And Rishi Vyasa, before he wrote the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita, there's this story that he wrote 18 Puranas. This dude was so ahead of his time, guided in some sense by, the logos of the era, by the spirit of the era, and he writes 18 books on the evolution of society, culture, and pretty much civilization, through stories. Right, so he writes 18 books on these leaves beside a river, and after he has followed his inner intuitive, let's say, world soul guidance of writing these 18 books, the story goes that an angel appears to Rishi Vyasa, this yogi, and the angel tells him, Rishi Vyasa, unless you write about your love for truth, you will not feel liberated. And it's another way of saying that, at least the way I interpret it, is that a person can intellectually live through, let's say, the heroic rhythms of their realm, only to realize that after the job of the intellect has been done, it's as if the life of the heart begins, regardless of how the brain perceived. You see, that is the maturity of this lifetime. This is the thing that all those who choose the path of knowledge over the path of love, they realize inevitably. You see, geometry is infinite, but the love of a temporary geometric shape for the universe is finite. Imagine there was this very loving human being, and then the loving human being realizes mortality, and they're like, no way, it's like each human being has 100 years to love the world they're in once. What I'm trying to say is that the ancients seem to have considered that if the world is a greater multidimensional event than physical, assumptions on it, in some sense, to have a living relationship with your universe surpasses a lifeless measurement or analysis of it. That means it's where the world is heading, not for people to be understood. I will make a prediction that I think in, let's just say for the sake of, knowledge, it's like, I think in like 100 years, or 100 years may be too soon, let's say 100 to 500 years, what the major teaching of what the world is going to be, it's as if like, imagine somebody reading about a horse, like you read about a horse, the anatomy of the horse, okay, and then there's some people who ride the horse, okay. Those who ride the horse have a supremacy, a supremeness of understanding that those who just analyzed what the horse was, in some sense, didn't. What I'm trying to say is that there's this intelligence that has woken up on this planet, okay? this intelligence separated from the whole system so that it could be a world creator of its own. It has created worlds of analysis overlaying a sort of still physical and silent existence. To me, human beings talk a lot, but the periodic table is silent. Nobody says, hey, did you hear the sermon of that electron? Pretty much what I'm trying to tell you, the analysis of the realm and the comparison of reality from comparing how the human being is comparing the outer physical realms, the outer objective realms with a sort of inner subjective realm. It's like this. It's like I'm saying, when there was no separation between an inner world and an outer world, oh my God, look at nature, it's all oneness. And then when the inner world and the outer world separated, in some sense the dichotomy of the natural and the unnatural began. And so it's another way of saying, if natural nature was a sort of pattern of a collective awareness functioning, I would say that when the individual arose, and this is due to creaturehood, that means to me one of the greatest mysteries on this planet is, why is there even creatures? Why did the void need some sort of intelligence to notice it? It's as if the world is creating beings, creatures, just so it can be acknowledged. It's as if the cosmos was lonely, and so the history of mankind began. That's something many people don't consider, that the creator state is a very lonely state. People don't realize this. They think, that God is not alone, but what if it is? When you look at an inventor, like you look at Nikola Tesla's life and how this dude made the AC motor, and this dude chose a seclusion that gave him an ability, like it was as if his solitude was a hidden telescope that he could see further alone, than with the, audience. And so imagine that just like an inventor that creates an invention, the inventor is alone. But the moment the invention is made, the inventor is no longer alone. That means it was as if a lonely cosmos or a lonely existence turned itself into multiple universes. We even get the clue of this from Greek mythology, which is a bit, at least to our modern times of thinking, a bit weird. But what it is that it's like from one original point, many points extended. All ideological systems, usually those that have a sort of creator involved in them, these ideological systems are like trees. That means from the singular trunk there arises many branches. And if we I don't know how to say it, like the concept of God is so complex and so simple at the same time that really a person can say as much as they want about it, but you can never touch the inconceivable. And then there's also this view of the humanized angle of the religious story, of the Abrahamic story, where the person's like, it's as if God made an invention, and then the rebellion in heaven was God's conscience, And so God's conscience, in some sense, wanted to test. Do you know what I'm saying? It's I'm trying to tell you, like, the Abrahamic story is another. They say man is made in the image of God. So a human being does something wrong and their conscience kicks in, and because of their conscience they give it another go at an act of redemption. And so to me it was as if the God made man, made human. It was as if like God made human beings, but God wasn't sure. God doubted its own creation, and because it doubted its own creation, it could not forgive. Do you know, it was as if, let's say, that moment where Adam and Eve take the apple, it's as if God wasn't like, oh, don't worry guys, I created you, so it's my fault. God didn't take that approach. Do you know? Because it's a test of intelligence, it's a test of ability. It's as if we are, human beings are, theologically God's way of knowing God is God. It's as if the failure of mankind is it's as if the failure of the ultimate. And you know what's bizarre for me? I'll honestly share this opinion of mine with all the religious people on the planet. Like I don't mind saying this. That it's as if isn't everything God's creation. Do you know? Like that's the bizarre thing. How could religions have ever fought each other? You're fighting God's creation. Do you know? And so the mind's God is different than, like Spinoza, Baruch Spinoza perceived an existential God. He was pretty much like how existence is happening at once all the time is like God. Pretty much Baruch Spinoza was like, if he lived in primitive times, he would have been a shaman. This world does have life, but the issue is that the human being cannot understand the life of an unknown world, without starting from its known position first. Do you know how many human beings on this planet? I would say maybe like it's 12% right now. 12% of the population has a capability to step out of their memory and to discover what I mean when I say nature is unknown. The edge of the world is unknown, dear listeners. Whatever language promises you, it will be false. All that language can be is just, in some sense, firewood to gain momentum, If the cosmos doubted itself, it would explain the unnatural. And the beautiful thing about this life is that whoever you are, wherever you are, if you start from a sort of neutral reset of perception, you can realize that this world is kind of like existence for the mind is like the mind is waiting to place stickers on existence so then it can feel content. But when the mind realizes there is an unknowable factor in the world, this is when religions start making sense. That means I see religious businessmen and I'm like, these poor souls are like, like destroying their own minds. Do you know? Do you know that means it's like religion is a multidimensional being's belief, And if the world has just this view that we're a singular dimension of a being, it's as if, what can I say? It's like when a multidimensional being doesn't realize it's multidimensional, it believes in the karma of one dimension. Right? That means imagine somebody went to the Buddha and was like, hey Buddha, are there other universes? And maybe the Buddha was like, I don't know what the Buddha actually said, but maybe I'm trying to think if the Buddha was asked that question, he'd probably be like, yeah man, look at the garden, there's so many different flowers, why not? Let's say there's so many different parallel universes right now. Just like a flower has many petals, similarly it's like the human beings has many parallel universes, right? And so imagine the person was like, okay Buddha, so if I have multiple parallel versions of me kind of happening in the moment, again, another metaphor would be like we have 5 fingers but they're connected to the palm, right? So imagine this guy gets gone to Buddha. It's like, Buddha, like if there's a multi-universal perspective, then in some sense does every parallel self of mine have karma? Like it's like a person realizing they're an infinite being in infinite parallel universes, they have a self, and then they're being like, oh my god, I wanted to get enlightened, so does that mean I have to get enlightened in endless parallel universes of myself? Like all versions of this life force that is being me, does it need to return and in some sense remember its original state? And I would say really what it is that it's as if the mind is a divine gift. I am telling you, like if Thor's hammer fell in the hand of, like, let's say a construction worker that needed a hammer, like it's as if some sort of a creator-based ability is within the creation that was created by the creator. You see, it's just cause and effect personified. The bizarre thing about the world we live in is that the atheists look at the theists who believe in a religious world and they're like, look at what are these guys doing? It's foolishness, right? But at the same time, the atheists, it's as if the theists look at the atheists and they're like, or how would I say it? Imagine there's three people, okay? There's a theist, there's an atheist, and then there's like a, philosopher with nice sunglasses. I really feel like if I was a philosophy teacher in a university, the first assignment would be for all the students to dress like they're in the movie Matrix. Like a classroom of everybody dressed like they're walking in the Matrix, That would be a good philosophy class. What I'm trying to say is that the theist believes in God. God is seen as a subjective position of certainty. Because it's seen as a subjective position of certainty, let's say the secular atheistic mind is like, okay, why are you telling yourself this story? But then the issue comes for the secular and atheistic mind that the self that is denying something else being false is actually a work of fiction. Really what it is, it's like the battle between fiction and non-fiction. Okay, in regards to the current beliefs of the human being, right? Non-fiction is materialistically accurate, its behavior, but fiction is in some sense wild, right? And wild, a wilderness, like, is another way of saying it cannot be tamed, it cannot be controlled. That means imagine right now, whoever you are listening, there is a dimension to your being that has never forgotten the ability of its wilderness. You see, I am not telling people be wild in the sense of like violence. Violence is like an idiot's game. It's just a waste of time when you have an advanced, after you, it's like a species evolved 4.5 million years to be able to see something incredible, and then instead of seeing it, it's like, they're poking each other's eyes, The sense of self is also subjective and hollow, but which is another way of saying, I'm saying when it comes to biological existence, non-fiction, when it comes to who is considering matter being here, that subject is fiction, right? So personality is a sort of fiction. Do you know? Beliefs in abstraction are fiction, right? But it doesn't mean fiction cannot turn to non-fiction. Like fiction can turn to non-fiction, right? A person suddenly gets a feeling like, they hear the sound of a phone call, but the phone's not ringing, and then suddenly, like a minute later, the phone starts ringing. It was as if like a moment where non-fiction presented itself. Fiction presented itself, but then through how reality happened, fiction became non-fiction. It's pretty much like, I remember hearing like Richard Dawkins saying, like, if there was like some sort of, okay, I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but the idea, like in an interview with Jordan Peterson, he was saying like, if the supernatural was actually natural, like then it would be something that every scientist would be studying, like how Jesus walks on water. You know what I mean? Like the scientists would be all around Jesus, like looking at the water, looking at his feet, like just trying experiments to figure out how's this man doing this, right? And eventually you realize that there is an authority beyond human intelligence, but this authority, I would say only the mystics can see it and be wise enough to not touch it. You see, people's minds are different. I think this has to do with a person's nature. So if you're someone who's kind, your mind is going to reveal itself through that archetype. The archetypes your attention has been in the most. I'm trying to say that if we make existence the cause, in thousands of years we would be all nihilists. If we make the unknown the cause, we would be an ever updating species. That means in the future they're not going to ask, what do you believe in, what do you disbelieve in, you know? They're just going to be like, at what level of advancement is your attention on? Which means that for the first time human beings are treating knowledge as if it's the birthright of an infinite being. That is the value of knowledge. People don't realize. Just like people can say technology, like mechanical technology is kind of like leading the future generations into being machines. Knowledge and the intellect is leading human beings not to be machines, to be an infinite viewer of reality. Knowledge is turning people into infinite beings. And right now you look at history, at least in my school of thought, I've divided it into 4 phases. Phase 1, there was nothing going on in this cosmos. It's as if space was just chilling. Phase 2, suddenly there was a spark. There was some beginning of an existence. This is the singular view. That means there was nothing, then there was something. Then this something was actually 2 things, and this is duality. All those people who think about oneness, it's as if that's where we started from. It's as if how you know a human being has not understood his oneness, has not understood oneness. It's like when the person says, I have achieved oneness. It's like, get out of here, man. You have no clue what it is. You know, because it is not conceptual. You know, the human being went through an inconceivable empty point, then empty or unobservable, and then it came to a singular position where there was a body of a creature moving around. Then this body divided into, became conscious of itself somehow. Evolution made an object into a subject to itself, right? And now the subject is functioning through dualistic intelligence. It's another way of saying your mind is actually creating chaos and order, and your body is creating the concept of fullness and absence. You know. On some level, we can say the human mind is an intelligence that translates, that transforms light into sound and symbology and perception. Right now, we have reached a point in history where this is how I feel. This is honestly what I think is happening. I think we have reached a point in the nature of human history where everybody's intuition and all those people's Jungian divine synchronicities, they are leading you to the final frontier that the human species needs to conquer, and this is when they are leading intelligence to infinity, to like, how do I say it, an infinite archetype. That means the body is running towards immortality, and the mind is in some sense running towards based on its shape, infinity based on its space, eternity. We have come to a point where attention no longer needs to hold duality. This means that the era of advanced communication has come. This means the new definition of the human being is a multidimensional being, which is, in some sense, there's 4 dimensions like seasons happening through every person. Winter, spring, summer, fall, the void, the singular, the dual, the infinite. These seasons come and go. But what's really powerful, I would say, is in some sense activating greatness, and then whatever wants to happen in life can happen. Imagine a human being who let's say they asked them, do you care about the afterlife? And the human being was like, the afterlife is inevitable, but what is alive now? It's as if you're trying to build something that we are trying to live in the sky. That's the destiny of the human species. There is going to be so many romance novels written in the future of lovers where one lover went to space. You know? Like it would be the Romeo and Juliet of outer space, you know? Or maybe like something that's not a tragedy. The world has always waited for itself. You know, the earth is like a silent guardian of itself. You know, sometimes people are like, you know, imagine somebody has like, you know, a holistic ego. And they're like, nature loves me. And then the person realizes, no, nature loves itself. The more natural you are, the more you feel you're being loved by, let's say, the guideline. You know, to me, it's honestly, if there was a shamanic guidebook, it would start off by like, be honest, be simple. Because the moment a person is simple, they become fearless. You know, this has been my ability in all these years of my life to counteract fear, you know, by making myself too simpler than the situation to observe it, you know. Like, we cannot ignore how there's 8 billion creatures, human beings, and they each have their own private world. They each have their own artistic universe behind their eyes that, unless they care, it will never see the outer ones. Do you know? There's times where I think, did it make sense that I spent my lifetime, you know, converting the inner realms into the outer realms, or should I have only converted the outer realms into the inner realms? You know, selfishness is converting the outer realms only into the inner realms. Selflessness, which is in some sense the secret that it's like the secret cheat code of our species. If human beings all could entertain a multidimensional perspective, they would realize that there is no right and wrong in a multidimensional system. There's just a massive probability generation. That means you could think that something is wrong, but then you could think about that wrong being right or wrong. Do you know? man's mind has noticed that there's two ways to exit duality. Okay? It's one way is oneness, the other way is infinity. And infinity means that you increase the speed of chaos and order. And when you increase the speed of chaos and order discover their codependence. It's as if in all the mythologies where people thought like the armies of demons were fighting armies of angels, it's as if without each other they would be meaningless. Do you know the order without chaos has no meaning? That means it's as if the only reason an angel fell was because duality needed to exist. People don't realize this, but I think to a philosopher, the fallen angel archetype is just duality. Samsara is duality. Evil is belief that one side of the coin is superior to the other, yet they are both God's creation. Like imagine like a religious police officer being like, okay, how do I judge this? How do I judge this situation of like humanoid? You look at evil people and you see like, oh my God, God created that. As a religious person, you may think like this, right? When you see a good person, you're like, wow, God's good, You see a bad person, God's bad. It's like, what is this? Like such a robotic way. Chaos and order is the domain where creatures can create. To be able to experience infinity means dehumanized. That means if there were four phases to, let's say, existence, okay, the zero phase, the one phase, the two phase, and the infinite phase, I would say the zero phase is dehumanized, the singular phase is dehumanized, the dualistic phase is humanized, the infinite phase is dehumanized. That means we are experiencing such a rare moment in manifestation that we are being creatures on a rock. That means I'm talking about the meaning of the context of reality. On one angle, it could just be empty, and emptiness is inhuman. Emptiness is dehumanized. Nihilists will realize like they are nothing, believing in nothing. So nothing believes in nothing. So it's nothing from the beginning. You could have a singular view. To me, I'm trying to bring this into culture, so I'm calling those who believe in nothing the voidists. Voidians, whatever way you want to call it, right? Those who believe in oneness, they're the singularians. Like imagine like a, cultural video game, right? Those who believe in duality as the context of reality, those are, that's the common man. Those are dualitarians, let's say, or dualists, And then we have those who believe in infinity. And those who believe in infinity are so rare because to the cultural mind, all that they can appear as is in some sense like, a time traveler's mistake. The future is divine because it reveals. If revelation is being considered divine, the newest technologies being discovered should be seen as the same level of divinity. Do you know, I understand how a book can be holy and sacred, and a person, dusts off, makes sure like, a book is properly placed in their household, right? But what the book is pointing to is that the truth can be nothing else but everything on some level. That means the infinity's destination is into the void that leads it to the ultimate singular. Now check this out. In the zero phase, there is no time. In the oneness phase, there is infinite time, actually. That means infinity has to be happening somewhere. Like the concept of infinity and oneness, if we mesh that together, it's the most bizarre concept. How could infinity be one? Ooh, this is the deepest concept I've ever come across. Like, what is this? Oneness and infinity. Oneness means the edge of everything is known and it's being one thing, but infinity means the edge of it can't be known. You know, infinite oneness. You know, someone tuning into this podcast is like, is this guy speaking about infinite oneness right now? Like, what's that? Oh man, I gotta get my charger. I think this laptop's gonna die, guys. Hold on. Quick intermission, I'll be back. You know, I would say this concept of infinite oneness, I would like to name it Singularity ad infinitum. Or Singularity infinitum. The world is the journey of eyes into the edgeless, into the endless. Human intelligence has an infinite birthright. It has a dualistic birthright, it has a singular birthright, and it has a void birthright. That means imagine in the future like an immortal being, you know, an immortal person complaining that they wanted to be mortal. It's as if I don't know how to say it. It's just for how long will an unknown inner viewer, an unknown momentary viewer, like it's being the whole moment. For how long will the unknown watch the unknown potential of manifest known worlds, of manifesting known worlds? For how long will creation be here? And for how long does it need to be here? These are questions that those who, like in the future in schools, they're going to teach about dehumanized states of mind. Like if a university sponsored me, I'd probably talk to them. But really, what can we do? 8 billion biochemical world simulating engines. It's as if we are hiding the extension of the world behind our eyes, and should it not be the purpose of the lifetime that not only did our bodies move in a world, our minds created the world, you know? And what is the purpose of creation? Like if when an inventor makes something, they want to see it be globalized. That's the nature of the, I would say, decency of the human being. We want to see greatness globalized. If somebody starts from this, you know, let's see it, you know, this might be a bizarre word to coin, but it would be like, we have, let's say, globalists and we have greatists, T-I-S-T-S. Imagine they create a religion called greatness. And people would have no choice but to say that's a great religion. if the name of the religion is called greatness, like it's like I believe in greatnessism. What time is it? Okay. Wonder about not your absent self, not your singular self, not your dualistic selves. Wonder about the infinite. The greatest thing man can do is establish conscious relationships with what remains, what stands in his collective unconscious. There's a quote from Carl Jung I want to read. He says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So it's another way of saying, like, for a limited time, the human being has an ability to understand the world in such an advanced and sophisticated way that other species are in awe of, really. The human being's presence in the natural world has been a sort of enlightening push to all the other species, I would say. The species has made mistakes, but the benevolence of how nature has wanted it to be here is like where the power comes. Is it enough to just be alive? Or should collective living be attempted? Imagine a world so advanced that suffering had gone extinct. And it wasn't a blind kind of Brave New World utopia. No. A world where there was a core honor for natural dimensions of life, and how natural dimensions of life have moved into what we consider as unnatural patterns. You see, we are the only species on this planet that builds skyscrapers. The superiority of human intelligence can't be ignored. It's like we bear a responsibility. What was it, like Spider-Man, where Uncle Ben's suit, like on the cover of it, it was saying, with great power comes great responsibility. With great experiential awareness of existence, there comes the responsibility. It's as if the moment something better is seen, the human species cannot ignore it, and that time has come. Imagine a civilization so advanced it cannot be possessed by ideological systems. It cannot be possessed by objects or subjects. It is like the human beings are walking in such advanced ways that the suffering of the past will become meaningless to the future. It's like the ability, the past, the future generations are going to look at 2022 and be like, you guys didn't use the resources you had. You know, because it was as if we were under the wrong premise. You know, it does make sense to just be a self in a world, but when the self at the end of the life is dissolving back into the world, it's as if you have a limited time to understand how the world is being yourself. That's the beauty of mysticism. Whoever you are, through the strategic certainty of the intuition of not your personality. It's as if I am telling you, there's some people who they think they're spiritual and they listen to inner voices, but I will tell you what it really is that if you go a level deeper, you're going to realize like the intelligence starts from a state of being, and then it starts comprehending what it is doing, right? This is the only way the personality can exit the moment anytime peacefully. You know. You know, they talk about extremism in the media, but to me, everything has an extremist side. A person can, you know, extremely love eating apples and just eat endless apples every day. You know, just survive on apples. You know? Something will happen to these 8 billion inner realms. Either we're gonna have every person being a writer on this planet, a communicator. Here's the thing, like if we can make advancement equal culturally to the top of the hierarchy, it's another way of saying the best case scenario is the most advanced scenario. The most advanced scenario does not ignore simple dimensions of meaning and complex dimensions of meaning. Pretty much, you know, honestly, I'll say it. Regular animals on this planet, they're here to actually become acquainted with, I would say, the known intelligence. Human beings are here to experience an unknown. They're just here to experience the unknown. That's the purpose of, I would say, the mind's. That's the mind's target. You know. If you think about the body being a bow, your mind being an arrow, and then the soul being that which is pulling this arrow and about to release it from the bow, and let's say the lifetime happens, the moment the thing is released, the arrow's released, the bow's released. And so it's as if the mind of every human being has been thrust into manifestation, has been thrown, has been shot into in existence, right? And there is a momentum we bring. It's not just like past life imagery, it's like rhythms, right? It's like rhythms of familiarity, of existential meaning. There's moments on this planet where I have felt like my eyes have been new, and there's been moments where I have felt my eyes, like my awareness has been here before I could ever be. It's as if I was being the space of life before what's in it. And we all are actually being that. But it's just so culturally impossible to position, because good and evil, chaos and order have possessed the ability of the human mind to see beyond those dimensions. It's the motivation for life really comes from what is important. If a person thinks nothing is important, then the meaning of life is that nothing. If a person thinks everything is important, then the meaning of life is how life is being alive, how everything is standing, how everything is here, right? It's as if we think we're alone, but it's as if the periodic table is everywhere. When in the title I say the unnatural association of consciousness, pretty much I'm saying that consciousness is behaving differently than its environment due to this initial, it's as if the DNA has a sort of separating itself from its environment game going on, It's as if the DNA was seen like this mysterious agenda of a biological program, biochemical program to endlessly continue into the realm. It's like human life is like how eternity, how an eternal being is tunneling through existence, I think it's one of the most beautiful emotions I've ever got is without, I could tell you, it's just this feeling of boundlessness. It made, I am telling you, the infinity has a beauty that shocks duality. Just like people get bored of TV shows, it's as if the human mind can get bored of the story of life. Now, what its options are, it's as if you either serve the mind of your species or you serve the body of your species. So for example, let's say you're a construction worker or you're a chef, you are serving the body of the species, the physical continuity, right? But let's say you're a writer or you're an author or a teacher or something, you're serving the mind of the species. And then those who actually, how can I tell you? I mean, it's not a one-man thing. It's not like some one person built an advanced civilization. So that's what I'm trying to say is that when there is 8 billion hidden universes, countless universes behind our eyes, it can never be, a singular thing. It's either we all win or we all lose. If one person wins, we all lose. If only one person wins, which means the system's different. There is something about the sophistication of how deeply the mind has an ability to recognize where it is. that I can tell you I have no choice because this is a podcast, like I'm speaking, I'm using language. But if I was to really tell you the secrets of mysticism, because you know it's like this: you start off as a scientist, then you end up as a psychologist, then the psychologist ends up as a philosopher, and then the philosopher ends up as a mystic. Why? Because if they're being pulled by the unknown. Everything in the universe of knowledge can be said to be had, and just like gravity acts on matter, it's as if the unknown acts on knowledge. It's a force that it's not just the inspiration, you know. It's like, let me tell you, it's inner authorization to be, regardless of how the outer is. If the species focuses on efficiency and freedom, that means we've, like all the greatest minds on the planet, begin to fathom what would an efficient global freedom look like. That means there's enough smart people on the planet to just gather around and be like, okay, what's a better way we can reset the structure of all that we have built? How can we fascinate our ancestors with the greatness of the future we cared for? Because I am pretty much sure everybody in 2022, your ancestors, like, it's very impossible for them to have global honor. The more you go back in history, the less people cared that they were being people. You know? I don't know why, but I feel I need to go into a quote tunnel right now. There's this man named Papaji, and I thought of reading his quotes. He says, if there is peace in your mind, you will find peace with everybody. If your mind is agitated, you will find agitation everywhere. So first find peace within, and you will see this inner peace reflected everywhere else. You are this peace. Papaji says, the one who follows the thought is also a thought. The one who follows the thought is, in full caps, in thought. When you know that both are thoughts, you are home. You're not at home, you are home. The R is in caps. He says, then allow thoughts to arise and allow them to be followed. You remain as that unmoved and unconcerned being with a capital B. This is the highest understanding. Yeah, he's pretty much saying, like, access Brahma Loka in your inner realms. Activate Brahma Loka in your inner realms. Which is another way of saying that it's like how Swami Krishnananda would say religion is God remembering himself. It's as if you don't become God, you remember God. You know? The mirror never lied. Papaji says, if you see the illusion, you're enlightened. But if you think that you're enlightened, you're in the illusion. Because there's nothing to hold on to. That's the purpose of true meditation. The discovery of not just an unknown world, but your unknown self. I have an unknown self, which is where the administration of how my imagination moves orchestrates from. My unknown self is my whole moment, though. So to me, it can't be a belief, it can't be an idea. That means it's as if somehow it has become impossible for me to allow a story to replace direct experience. But the issue is that the mind is like a rare privilege. It's as if you have one lifetime to study this antenna that has never existed before like this. The ability to honestly wield our eyes is, I would say, an incredible path to take on this planet. Really what it is that fear makes us dishonest, and if fear was gone because the species was too smart to make itself fail, no longer will inner illusions and outer illusions limit the potential of the unknown attention. Papaji says it is all your desires that you see when you think. But when your mind is quiet, without desire, you're complete and as wonderful as you have always been. Papaji says you're all lions, so go your own way. Do not walk the beaten path like sheep, one after another. Do not follow any path. Lions do not follow each other like sheep. Yeah, but these lions can orchestrate their roars, That means imagine one lion roaring in front of you, and now imagine 8 billion lions. It's like before you saw one lion roaring in front of you in the mirror, and then you saw 8 billion lions roaring towards the future, as if the future has become the great mirror. The future is the greatest mirror. There we go. The future is the greatest mirror. Exactly. If we fail, the past will feel it has failed. It's as if the failure of the human species is the greatest dishonor. That means, imagine, it's like what's more important than worshiping your ancestors is in some sense fascinating them. Are the eyes of infinite freedom alive once? Does the mind get to experience the day only once? And how far should a species care for its own ability? Like, what else can anybody else say to one another? It's as if have you found the greatness of the future, or has the past convinced you too soon? When the skies become our homes, when cyberspace becomes the only battlefield, genius will bloom on Earth, and it would be as if like the human being doesn't even have time to care for aliens, because the future human beings that are going to be born are so incredible. When the vision of the advanced civilization is collectively accepted, when 8 billion human beings at the back, at the back of their mind, they realize their species deserves to see how advanced it can be before it goes extinct. In the name of universal advancement, regardless of the natural dimensions and the unnatural dimensions of consciousness, regardless of all the frameworks to reality, it's as if a command arises from within. It's as if your inner universe roars, and so the outer life suddenly wakes up to its limitation, to its mortality. And mortality is the greatest motivational speaker. That means time is a conquer, and people would say, why are we in a world where we're getting conquered by time? And the answer is for you to actually realize life has given you a challenge. That means it's as if to me, sure, like my personal life, that's one dimension, my, collective cyber life, that's another dimension. But ultimately, I think about, like, as if, let's say, poetically, for the sake of like keeping mythology alive somehow, that there's many gods watching mankind right now, right? And it would be as if, like, an ant on a table that suddenly has noticed, like, human beings are looking at it like when the ant's on the table, right? So I'm saying it's as if when you take this perspective that the ultimate greatness of reality is watching you, then you're no longer polite or rude. It's as if your attention just goes to as if what is the greatness. Like, do you understand what I'm saying, guys? I have found an algorithm to perception that efficiently connects the human psychology to infinity. The advanced civilization is, think of God's greatest gift to itself. The advanced civilization is humanity's a moment where it pulled Excalibur from the stone of, the void. Just like a king, let's say, just, I'll take the listeners into the eyes of King Arthur before he was King Arthur. He's like, oh my God, is that a free sword? And suddenly he was worthy, he's the only one who understood you. Imagine pulling out destiny. There's so many ways the world can move, it's ridiculous. Papa G says, when mind is quiet, all is self. When mind moves, the world arises. So be still, throw away everything, and be free. Papa G says, stop everything. When he says everything, that means he's saying stop even building an advanced civilization. And then he's saying, then you will realize you're the freedom you have been searching for. But the effort to build an advanced civilization is post-freedom. It's as if what would enlightened beings do no longer think about enlightenment. They would just be the presence of their world. Papa G says thoughts are impediments to seeing your deepest nature. Don't give rise to any thought and discover who you are. That ocean of eternal peace is you. Papa G says, what is the difficulty that we suffer from? It is that we seek peace elsewhere and do not experience that we are peace incarnate itself. And I would say to build an advanced civilization is just responsible peace incarnate itself. Really, what Papa G is saying when he says don't give rise to any thought, this doesn't mean you're not going to have thoughts. It means you need to, just like in a museum where they say don't touch like the objects or art gallery, right? Similarly, you need to have the same relationship with your inner realm where you are watching as just the simplest, effortless presence, natural presence of your moment, the content of your mind. Right? And then when you watch something, it doesn't mean you're giving rise to thoughts, But when he says don't give rise to any thoughts, it's another way of saying he's saying just sit down and don't want anything from the moment. That's really when you start to notice that the observer is not like an idea you understand, it's just the presence of nature. Papaji says we think we have to be a certain way because we have been taught to be a certain way. Actually, the only truth is to keep quiet and see what happens from there. When I feel ill-tempered, when I feel sad, when I feel distant, it's just something that is happening. When I don't compare it to the past and project it into the future, then it's just something that is happening now. It's a way of dying now. Yeah, he's saying if you don't have time as a variable in your perception, everything is just what's happening now. Papaji says whatever comes, let it come. What stays, let it stay. What goes, let it go. Papaji says you have to simply become aware of the movement of the mind, which begins this endless trouble. And he means, you know how you become aware of the movement of your mind? When you notice the unknown watcher. It's pretty much like something's looking out through your eyes that is unknown, do you know? And it's looking at a known perception of reality and making its assumptions from that. Papaji is saying when you actually become aware of the movement of your mind, you also need to simultaneously have had the experience of being an unknown presence. Presence is such a supreme word, you know, because it's beyond personality. How a moment is present is how an emotion has landed as the foundation of the sort of arisal of meaning. Papaji says all that you're attached to, all that you love, all that you know, someday will be gone. Knowing this and the world is your mind, which you create, play in, and suffer from, is known as discrimination. Discriminate between the real and the unreal. The known is unreal and will come and go, so stay with the unknown, the unchanging, the truth. That means when you can watch how change is being, that's when you're free from ideological anguish. So no, you can't suffer possibly, because there's what self is suffering. You know, they ask children what do you want to be when you grow up, but you don't see the children being like, okay, first let me see what consciousness is, and then I'll tell you, you know. Papaji says anything that you have imposed on yourself to be unhappy, to be bound, is a concept. It is an imaginary concept. So give it away. And keep in mind, previously he said everything goes away eventually. Right? That's why I record these talks, because it's ways of keeping the eyes of my past self alive, you know. Papaji says, know that what appears to be love for an, in quotations, other is really love of self, because, in quotations, other doesn't exist. So this innermost love can be given to no other. Love of friends is for the sake of self, not for body to body. True love has no lover or beloved, because all love is love of self. When he says self with a capital S, he's pretty much saying, like, this is the thing about religion where strangely it occupies, I think, the same positioning of mind where, let's say, the romance, cultural romance dimension would be, where it's another way of saying, like, the divinity is the whole moment. So it's as if when you are the presence of the unknown divine alive, like it's as if when you realize you are the life that is like being alive, like the life force, there is an inconceivable, untouchable truth to it, that when you realize how unknown everything is being, the knowledge cannot possess you. You become instantly free, actually. I will tell you, as much as I have created memories, I have also witnessed memories being destroyed. And when I say memories being destroyed, it's as if the value of an idea, based on where the attention goes, suggests what it contains. Papaji says, look within. There is no difference between yourself, self, and guru. You're always free. There is no teacher. There is no student. There is no teacher. Papaji says, if you don't know, then it's all right. There need not be any expectations. If there are no expectations, then you are free. If you expect, then you are in bondage. Choose whatever you want. Expectations are never fulfilled. Papaji says something is happening because of silence, because of peace, because of silence. If your mind is silent, if your mind is quiet, there is God, there is silence. This is the silence that is contagious. Papaji says, always remember, the thieves of peace are thieves in an empty house because only imagination suffers. You are peace, that which remains untouched. What an incredible quote. Papaji says, I am your own self and the self of all beings that exist. Papaji says, look after everybody so they are happy to see you. It is better to serve the devotee of God than to serve God himself. Because inevitably it's the same. You see, it's whether we live for ourselves, we live for the world, it's a choice. It's pretty much how energy moved before it conceptually was liberated. Right now people don't feel it, but the human species has a heartbeat. But its heartbeat is how healthy its perception of its own future is. There is so much messed up stuff happening on the planet where at some point I'm like, evil cannot be tamed. This is the challenge of building an advanced civilization, where it is so advanced, it is having a response to all the dimensions present in the realm. An advanced civilization is another way of saying the greatest processing of all the information within it. It's as if civilization became too advanced to be just evil and good, Really, a great source of human honor is just wondering, what does the species deserve? Does this species deserve to just dwell in its inefficiency and, fear the dullness of inevitability? Like, what is the species here to do? 8 billion human beings on a rock in the middle of nowhere. I understand the freedom of just being a natural entity. Sure, live like the birds and squirrels, but you'll see it's as if there's a greater plan. To me, there is a divinity you find that concept in religion, and then to me, there is a divinity which comes from novelty. And what novelty is that how the world has been shaped so far is not the whole world. Which means as long as human beings have minds, the mind is creating worlds, or is simulating worlds. And because the mind simulates the world, you cannot ignore how your free will is acting like God behind your eyes. Right? The person cannot ignore this, but the proper attitude should be this is my strategy, where I'm like, okay, what would my simplest self, how would my simplest self view enlightenment, view truth? And I realize my simplest self does not have the concept of truth. You see, our eyes are awake. It's like consciousness has memories prior to its encapsulation and prior to being sculpted by the outer realms. Before language We all dwelled as the presence of attention to form. There's a geometrical awakening. It's as if the memory has to start, like consciousness in the child has to at some point be like, all right, now I need to shape myself here. And so as the child shapes itself, it is getting simultaneously shaped by the outer realms and the inner realms. And based on the decisions of the human being on this earth, karma is another way of saying like the ripples on the pond based on how hard each decision of your life has been, how intense it has been. Do you know? Those people who live intense lives, it's like a pilot that has to like, you know, the airplane has to do a backflip, you know what I mean? Imagine, this is such a hypothetical scene that just, like, I was just imagine there was an airplane pilot, okay? And imagine some sort of dragon appeared, right? And the airplane pilot was like, what the hell am I gonna do? There's a dragon right outside, you know? And so the airplane pilot does this next level tactic, imagine, where he goes above the dragon and just somehow does a twirl and shuts down the engine of like, do you know, the engine of, what do you call it? The engine of the plane, and just the plane just like a massive, you know, it's like this giant weight hits the dragon's face, you know. The reality. Existence is like a story we live in. You know, and experience is the story we tell ourselves. And really, at the end of life, the original source of attention is responsible for its being. A hidden freedom awaits those who have learned to honor their past, present, and future. When you honor your future, past suffering cannot exist. It's as if something so great will happen on this earth that we are all just privileged to, you know, be in its pioneering phase. People don't realize that we're living in the like pre-knowing what the mind is era. Every human being can be a researcher of the mystery of how intelligence is happening. Honesty is like a high quality advanced civilization leads to a high quality advanced civilization. Dishonesty means that advanced civilization has more simulations to deal with. We need to revalue the ideal of the human being and move it towards a freedom that is multidimensionally its birthright. The freedom to be surpasses any sort of beliefs that actions can bring. Where else can truth go? When man realizes, when the human being realizes that it is being the world, it's as if the ego was just, you know, a shadow. There's greater states of being, guys. It's the responsibility of the species to, you know, do something about it. Okay, so evidently in the chat section it seems that there's issues with the audio, and I would tell you, you know, imagine Imagine this episode is like a message in a bottle from the future, and it's like the quality you get is the quality you get. But sorry guys, I don't know. I mean, I have this sort of attitude where I'm trying to live really like a minimalist. So the laptop and my voice suffices. You know, it's like there's certain clues of how the future is going to happen. We see human beings, their intelligence advancing. That's one clue that something's going to play out in the future. We see technology, outer technology advancing. That's another factor. We see that human beings are realizing that we cannot let go of nature. Nature is as if like 50% of how the soul requires to be. And just intelligence becomes novelty. We're living inside a giant question mark. What greater inspiration can a person need? You're in an unknown world. Your eyes have opened to wonder about it. And now we're saying freedom, like the scenario of life is just supreme. It's as if you are the live stream. It's as if like this person was looking for a miracle, then they realized what the unknown movements of the minds of the species. You know, and I wrote this book called The Great Work, and I have this vision. In earlier talks, I would tell people that every person should start their great work. And their great work is pretty much how far their inner life advanced, how far it went, you know. We've reached a time where it's necessary to behave as if an advanced civilization is already here. A freedom devoid of greatness is in some sense an illusion. If we seek collective greatness, it would mean collective freedom. Collective freedom would mean we are so able that we managed to create that scenario. You know, we're living at a time where people don't believe, like in ancient Greece, there's gods walking on the clouds. But I will tell you, the questions that the human mind can ask, they are like on like as divine. You know, it's like instead of divine demigods, you know, it's as if divine questions. We have reached that point. That's the secular metaphysics. Anyways, guys, this episode, I feel I've said everything I can. Again, another pointer: billions of hidden accessible realities awaiting collective emergence. This means that I care to come up with an efficient, choose to care again for the world behind your eyes. That's what I'll say, the final thought on the subtitle. And the final thought on the title, the Unnatural Association of Consciousness, I was pretty much saying, like, you look at the type of civilization 1.0, like what we have so far, and it's like a bit unnatural because it is destroying nature. So that's like a pretty unnatural thing, you know. You know. When I say unnatural, I mean it in the sense like most creatures just live in their ecosystem. We are destroying our own ecosystem. Like that's like no species is doing that on the level that we are. Like it's like an unnatural byproduct of how the human mind became a subject to itself. I mean, seriously, after the person's done with the past, like, person's like, all right, whatever happened in the past happened. Like, the past is past. And then they look at the present. They look at the present, and they become content with the present. They're like, okay, it's the simplicity of how it's all being, right? And then all that is left is the future. And the future means the person has to choose to entertain an individual archetype to help build the possibility of a collective system. It's another way of saying we need to start building the roads that the future generations will walk on, right? Like that would be our greatest thing we can leave them, And I think, like, if all educational systems, all schools, like, before the child can graduate to the next grade, they have to plant a tree, right? If that becomes, like, globally mandatory. Imagine in the future you can rent a tree, like in some garden. The eyes are open, the world is here. Greatness awaits. What else can be said? Thanks for listening. Namaste.